yards against the TCU defense. We are now joined by the Executive Director of the College Football Playoff Committee, Bill Hancock, with us, David Smoak and Craig Smoak on 365 Sports. And, Bill, thank you for your time. Mark Harlan takes over for Jen Cohen. That's a one-year fix, and then once he moves into the Big 12, that means that will be filled by somebody else?
Yep, that's correct.
We appreciate your time.
Hey, how about that for an easy and quick answer?
Well, no, that was a very. I should never ask questions where it could be yes, no, or that's correct.
Hey, we're not going to fool around here.
No, I
yes
know.
Or no.
Well, we appreciate your time. Here's the thing: you had a meeting last week. You guys met last week. There's a lot to get to. What right now is the number one focus of what you're doing, not for this year, but for the future of the College Football Playoff Committee?
Well, it would be easy to spend our whole time working on the future. We can't. We have an event to put on this year, but I understand why you're asking and what you're asking, and it's really a good question. I think implementing the games, particularly the first-round games next year. No one's ever done this before. What? We're going to have playoff games on campus for college football? And we're going to have them in 15 months from now? Yes, we are. So things like tickets, lodging, stadium preparations, all that. And, there's 130 schools in our division, but only 4 of them are going to host games. But we have to kind of get everybody ready to do it.
How much has the disruption of just what's going on in realignment, whether it's not necessarily planning for right now, as you say, but looking at the future as we often also do, but how much has that kind of, I guess, paused any major decision-making and kind of how has that been taken in by the committee, knowing there's so many things that are up in the air and still not finalized quite yet as far as where everybody's even going to be moving forward?
Well, what's really not finalized as of today is what will become of the Pac-12 conference. And we're going to just sit back and wait for the dust to settle on that before we make any decisions. Clearly, we have a format which calls for the best 6 conference champions and the best 6 at-large teams. There'll be talk about changing that. I don't know if that'll happen or not, but really, for us, we're just moving forward and putting the new event together.
So the new event and where we are, last year, of course, you had the exciting game. TCU beats Michigan, Ohio State, Georgia go down to the wire, and then, of course, Georgia routs TCU in the final. That's going to happen, right? That you're going to have. There have been blowouts before in the championship game. Too many people I saw looked at, it was TCU, but they forgot that TCU beat Michigan. Is that something that's up for discussion every year?
Oh, it happens in playoffs. I was with the NCAA Final Four for 16 years, and we had some championship games that were not very competitive.
Mm-hmm.
We've had some CFP champ games that were not very competitive. Good grief, you remember the Super Bowls that were not competitive.
Yep. Like for 10 years in a row,
Yeah, people said Super Bowl. Well, for crying out loud, you can't control what happens on the field. And we did have the 2 terrific final games, and in a championship game that wasn't very compelling. That happened.
With the 12-team playoff, do you feel like college football can grab back some of the weekends that perhaps the NFL saw that were open and try to find your niche during that time?
Oh, we're going to grab the 3rd weekend of December, which the NFL also has. But they have the Saturdays in January. We would like to play then. Can we? No, those dates are taken. But we still have the best day for college sports, maybe for any sport, which is New Year's Day, and we intend to take full advantage of that with 3 quarterfinal games.
Would you say that the discussion, and I know, Bill, and we're going to get to this year, believe me, but there's a lot of interest because of the expansion. in realignment. But would you say the model of the 6-6 that you brought up that could end up being a different number, whatever it might be, is that in any kind of a way like a turf war among conference teams right now? Or presidents? President. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I've heard the conversations among the conference commissioners, and it's not. Everybody understands that there will come a time to talk about that, and when the time comes, we will talk about it, but I don't see anybody drawing any lines in the sand. They know what we have is a really good balance between rewarding conference champions and allowing space for at-large teams. It's a really good balance.
What number did you think before it started expanding would it end up at? Did you feel like it would ever get past 4 or 8 or whatever number that was in your head?
I never thought it would get past 12. That 12 just felt right. You know, and we talked about 8 3 years ago when putting the new format together. But 8 with some conference champions really would say with 6 conference champions would have reduced the number of at-large teams.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody wanted to go backwards on that. Now we have 4 at-large teams. All 4 are at-large. And nobody wanted to go backwards on that. So that kind of sunk the ship for 8 pretty early in the conversation. 16 felt like a lot of games. When could we play? 12 just felt really good.
Bill, I'm sure, I mean, you obviously pay attention to the conversations that out there. I'm sure you've heard about the super leagues and the fear of a lot of people. I mean, there's fear amongst the pack. 2 remaining, that's obviously its own unique situation. But just what are the places going to look like in the future? You mentioned that wasn't really much thought. How much is it important of the people in the room to have all of college football a part of the mix, to have opportunity? And what do you think when you hear of the Super League and the fears that this is going to eventually boil down to just a couple of conferences and everybody else will, have to be on the outside looking in?
Oh, I've heard that, of course. I don't see that happening. I will say this. I'm disappointed with what happened with the Pac-12 schools. I understand why they did what they did, but I'm sure disappointed that the Pac-12 was such an anchor for college sports on the West Coast for so many years. But, at the end of the day, every school can decide what conference it wants to participate in. That's really one of the beauties of college athletics. And those schools on the West Coast have decided they didn't want to be in the Pac-12 anymore. I'm not happy about it, but I understand why the schools did what they did.
Bill, as the executive director, the conference commissioners and everybody else that's involved, they obviously have a vote and have a say in this. What is your actual, not role? We understand you're helping run this thing. It's a big, monstrous thing, and it's getting bigger. But what are some things that you want to see done better?
People lose sight of the fact that what we do here primarily is manage a game, manage a championship event at the end of the season. We have 17 on our staff here. Our office is up in Irving, and that's really what we do. We also convene meetings of the commissioners and the university presidents that make the decisions about how the event is operated. What could we do better? I want to see the game grow. I want to see it draw more fans. It can never be the Super Bowl, so that's not our goal. But I want to see the event grow, and it has grown. It's prospered. It's doing great. But I want that to continue. I'm pleased with the selection process. That committee does a great job. So I wouldn't tweak that in any way. And we just need to figure out exactly what the new format will be, or if it will be anything different than we already have, which is 6-6. What will be like next year when we go to 12 teams?
Is there the thought process for so long about the student athlete, which I know that's changed, Bill? I mean, with what we see now in college athletics, about somebody having to play 2, 3, 4 weekends in a row. Is that just, hey, then make sure you're a better seed?
Well, there's three entry points into the CFP. One is be in the top four, and you do get a bye. The second one is be 5 through 8, and then you get a home game in the first round. And then the third one is just get in the playoff altogether. So be 9 through 12. I think we've got a nice break for the athletes. We certainly do between the conference championship games and the first round. Then there'll be another 9 or 10 day break between the first round and the quarterfinals. Players want to play games. That's why they sign up for college football. And they're certainly going to get the opportunity.
So a question I have for you, you mentioned the at-large. We know that there's 6. Is that going to be straight up what the College Football Playoff Committee rankings are like you've done before, or is that going to be a conglomerate of a few things combined?
No, it'll be exactly what we've done before. What we'll do starting in 5 weeks or 6 weeks with the selection committee, and that'll all be the same. Committee process, committee makeup, and those 6 at-large teams will be selected and ranked by the committee.
Do you see what Tulane did last year or what some teams might do this year? Is that going to be when it comes to an at-large, if they were not a conference championship, is it going to be hard for a group of 5 to get in if they don't win their conference and also ranked high?
We've done surveys of that. We ran the data for the last 9 years and more than that. And there were teams from those 5 conferences that did make it. They certainly now have a guaranteed pathway, which is to win their conference. And the top 6 conference champions will be in the playoffs. But I would tell everyone else, keep playing, keep fighting through November and certainly try to win your championship. But if you don't, play a good schedule, win your games, and you're going to be in the hunt.
Will the change in the Mountain West, if they add Oregon State, Washington State, what the American Conference might do, does that in any way affect the G5 opportunity as far as a conference champion, or is that going to always be just the one?
It really doesn't change their access into the playoffs. We currently have 6 spots for conference champions. The debate that I mentioned before is whether someone might say, should we go to 5? I don't know how that'll come out, but certainly they will have a guaranteed spot for a champion.
A couple of years ago, we had you on during the Big 12 Media Days, and you're there every year. And you brought up what Craig brought up about the super conferences. If, in fact, that was to ever happen, I know this is hypothetical, but if there became the 2 mega 20 or whatever number of schools, do you feel like if they were to separate, Bill, and separate from the others who are a part of the college football playoff hope right now, would those numbers be as high as they are if everybody's involved?
If I'm understanding the question properly, and by the way, I answered that part of the other question, so forgive me for that. I don't see conferences growing to that extent. That's a lot of schools to have in a conference. Our conferences our structure is different than the NFL, for example, because every conference can go sell its own TV rights, and of course the NFL sells the rights for everybody. So no, I don't. I just don't see conferences that big. Now, having said that, I didn't see the Pac-12 dissolving either. But I think we've about got to the limit of where a conference is a conference, and after that, it becomes something else.
Bill, did you ever foresee a team, the size of a TCU being able to make the impact they did last year? And just what are the thoughts on a brand like that, a new brand that's not necessarily the tried and true that we've, been conditioned to see year over year? How much excitement did that add to the process to have, no disrespect to your Bamas and your Ohio States and all that, but to have a little new blood shaking things up? What were your thoughts on that?
Well, what we care about is getting the best 4 teams in the playoffs. And we did last year, like I think we have all the years. We were so excited for TCU and for the fans, and certainly that Michigan game was off the chart. So yeah, it was good for college football.
Bill, the the playoffs about to expand. This year, you're going to have what we've already seen. Clemson goes down. There's a lot of football. LSU gets stumped by Florida State. Got some great games coming up this weekend. Can you try to explain the time when the College Football Playoff Committee members come into that room, and what are there like 15 flat screens? How is that done, and how much actual discussion between games or during the day go on?
Oh, good question. Well, first of all, the members are watching games. They watch games this weekend. We issue iPads to them and also connect them with services where they have access to every game in the country. By the way, I was caught up in the feud between Disney and Spectrum last weekend, and I was not very happy about it.
Yeah, you weren't the only one. Millions of, including me.
Oh.
Yeah.
It was awful. It was just awful. Anyway, we don't start ranking until after the 9th week of the season because we want to let teams build up their resume. You can't start ranking in the first week. My goodness. I mean, the first week was awesome. I loved it. It was fun. I'm glad to have college football back. But we wait until the 9th week. And the committee members watch games on their own. They don't watch games together. They don't have time to do that, frankly, but they all watch games on their own. And then they come together and they debate. They talk about what they saw. They talk about the data. They talk about the resumes that the teams have built up. And it's fun to watch the resumes change from when we start meeting in the 9th week through the end of the season. As teams add to their resumes by playing better teams, some resumes are diminished because teams lost or maybe they don't play quite as good a schedule over the last month. But that's how it works. The committee never watches games together, but they do have robust debates, that's for sure.
Bill, what do you say to those of fans that believe that there's like an agenda, a narrative, even before those people walk in the room, that they're going to bring the schools that are going to bring in the most money?
Oh, I think not. Crazy. Can't happen. Couldn't even happen. If anybody wanted it to happen. Each member has a different perspective on the game. They're all from different parts of the country. They represent different elements. Some are former players. Some are former coaches. Some are former journalists. Some are just people from higher education that follow the game. So they all have different backgrounds. They all learn the game in different ways. But their protocol calls for them to come together and rank the teams. And through the first 9 years of doing this, I've never heard or felt anyone trying to do anything other than get the best 4 teams, period.
If you don't mind me on this question, in 14 with Baylor and TCU, you remember that. I mean, it was intense, and eventually Ohio State jumped both of them and then won the whole championship, won the whole thing. Was that among the most intense discussions about who was going to be number 4 compared to most other years?
Oh, boy, that was intense. And right off the bat, we got it. We had an intense year. We've had other years that were way easier than that, where things kind of fell into place. Was it the most intense? I don't know that I would say that, but it certainly was intense because we had 2 schools that really didn't have great schedules. And we knew the outcome of that game, the Baylor TCU game. We saw what Ohio State did at the end of the season. It was a fascinating season to be a part of.
Can you see, though, because of that, and yes, Ohio State won it, that there are the thoughts that was the logo and TCU and Baylor weren't?
No, had nothing to do with it. Look at TCU last year. No, had nothing to do with it.
How much more money will the 12 teams bring in than your current model?
We don't know yet because we're in the early parts of the conversation about television. I've seen some numbers quoted by reporters, which I don't think are accurate. I think they're too high. But there will be more money coming into college athletics. which will for me, from my perspective, do nicely in supporting for all sports, from water polo to women's soccer to football.
If, in fact, the expansion of the teams in the playoff did not bring in more money, would you do it?
I think so. We should do it because it's about participation, about more students, more players getting a chance to compete for the championship. So yeah, I think it's a hypothetical question. No one can know.
Sure.
It didn't come to that. But I think we would have, yes.
Bill, thanks for your time. We appreciate it.
Hey, it's really been fun. Let's do it again pretty soon.
You don't want that. We'll have you on again.
Y'all are great.
Once we start getting some answers. Thanks for your time.
Your viewers need to know, your listeners need to know how smart you are and how up to speed you are on college athletics. I appreciate you.
Thank you, Bill Hancock, College Football Playoff Committee Executive Director. A lot of you who are on the chat room as I'm asking